Hello, and welcome to What We've Learned. As ever, it's myself, and I'm joined by Shane Redding. So this week, a fascinating topic. Shane and myself have been asked this a lot by a lot of people, online, offline, in the real world, wherever it may be, the brands that we work with, friends, colleagues, in and around social, and how brands, not just in 2020, can become more social. How can we harness the opportunities of social media? How do we make sure we don't get left behind? How can we become more active in that space to perhaps change our values? Lots of different reasons for it. So we put our thinking caps on, didn't we, Shane? And we said, well, who do we know who's the best at talking about this? Who's done it? Who's got the t-shirt, and indeed a company that does this with organisations? We've probably got the best we could get, Shane. Is that fair?
That's very fair. We're really lucky to be joined this week by Sarah Goodall, who is founder and CEO of Tribal Impact, an organisation which Sarah will tell us specialises in what's called social activation. So this isn't just social media marketing, but we're talking about using social for thought leadership, employee advocacy, social selling, and even Sarah's written the book on the social CEO, co-authored that. So we're really lucky to have Sarah with us this week.
We are indeed, yeah, and I'm sure you're going to find this a really fascinating, fast-paced session with Sarah. So, Shane, Steve, we're ready. Let's bring in Sarah Goodall.
So, Sarah, I think somebody that many people, if you're actually active on social, will be familiar with Sarah Goodall because that's, if you like, her métier. And I'm really delighted that you're joining us today and going to be talking a little bit about what you do, founding Tribal Impact, and perhaps some of the challenges along the way, having left big corporate life. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to this. It's nice to have a little chat. So yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Sarah, it's fabulous to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. As I say, lots to be social about. We are being sociable via Zoom and responsibly via this podcast. But as Shane said, I'm sure we're going to rewind at some point in terms of how you've got to this point. But I think it'd be fascinating just to hear for the listener what you're doing. So talk to us about your role, what you spend your time doing in the main at the moment. Perhaps we can start there.
Yeah, of course. So I run a business called Tribal Impact, and we set up in 2015. So we are 5 years old in our 5th year. And we specialise. We've got quite a niche, really. My dad thinks I play on Facebook all day, but we are essentially a social activation business. So we work with companies that want to activate their employees on social media, and that can be anything from subject matter experts and becoming influencers on social. It could be executive social comms. It could be social selling within the sales teams, or advocacy. And the thing is, they're all connected. So not a lot of, quite often when we see this in practice in businesses, they're operating in silos. So quite often you'll have the comms team doing executive comms, and you'll have marketing or the sales enablement team doing social selling. So quite often they're managed in silos, but actually I'm a big believer that the whole thing needs to you need to get your arms around it and give it a big old hug and squeeze it in together, because they all impact each other. And that's what we do as a business. So we provide services and products to help organizations do that at scale. So
I think that's really interesting because, that term silo, particularly in B2B marketing, is the one we just use all the time.
Yes.
But interesting for a new discipline, or relatively new, it's interesting that you should still see that as being done very separately. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's interesting because I started my journey on social media. I remember it quite clearly, actually. I just moved to Norway because I lived over there for 5 years, and I walked in the office and I said to somebody, what's all this Twitter stuff about? And they're like, oh, it's just for celebrities. I'm like, I don't think so. It's getting quite popular. And this would have been 2009, 2008, something like that. So quite in its infancy. And luckily I got the opportunity at SAP because I started a blog when I was in Norway, just writing about my diary and living over there. And suddenly I became the expert on social media because I had a blog, and it was like, it's got nothing to do with work. I'm talking about, tobogganing and things like that. And they're like, no, that's enough. Maybe you can explore what social means for our business. So I was given such a great opportunity in the early days to be right at the start of this social journey. And and have been on that wave ever since. So managing social for SAP in EMEA till 2015, when I took voluntary redundancy and set up Tribal. And I think it's not, in my experience, probably the tech companies are quite advanced at this. Most tech companies have seen it, but it has still bubbled up in silos. So you've got the sales teams trying to do social selling, you've got comms doing the exec comms. But what I don't see at the minute is I don't see often people grabbing the whole portfolio, the social taking sort of a holistic view across the business. And it tends to fall in the lap of either marketing for the brand channels and, you know, sales for social selling. So I think that I think companies have become social, but they've become social in silos. I think perhaps what the bit that they've not quite got back round to in terms of maturity is getting their arms around in it and putting it at a holistic level across the business. So yeah, so I think it depends which industry you're looking at, really. Some are more mature than others, I would say. So
I'm just listening in, Sarah. The idea of you mentioned kind of getting your arms around it, hugging it, cuddling it. Just in 2020, I can't remember that as a principle of being able to do that in life. But
no, it's more
it's
the
fond
elbow.
memories. But the idea, yeah, exactly. The idea that, I mean, the silos, as you've said, is a classic business problem. So this isn't a social problem. This is a business problem that you can see down this lens as well.
Yeah.
I just wondered what you mentioned, because obviously tech companies often are, or certainly are pinned up quite often as the industries and the spaces that are always doing this well. And maybe that is or isn't true. But the other industries, is it a really wide net of different people and organizations you work with, or do you see the same kind of industries that are trying to wrestle with this, and therefore lots of other industries that, you know, you're frustrated, oh my goodness, they're not doing any of this, why aren't they?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I have seen a massive shift over the last 5 years. Actually, the tech companies were on it. They were one of the first to adopt social selling and advocacy and things like that. But then you start to see more professional services taking this on board. So the legal industry, because they've got, they're selling services, they're selling knowledge and insight, and they have experts. So when you look at the influencer side of social, they're quite well geared up for that. The surprising one for me has been I would say manufacturing, engineering. We're seeing a lot more interest from those markets, which were perhaps a little bit late to the party, but that doesn't matter, because what they're doing is skipping all the mistakes that everybody else has made. You can sort of fast track them through a lot of that. So, the maturity of the industry is now fast tracking some of those laggards a lot quicker. Is what I have seen. I tell you, the industry that I've not seen so much of this is the pharmaceutical. Not really embracing this yet, which surprises me, because again, it's an industry, but maybe regulated industries quite often are terrified of the whole letting employees loose on social media. Because they're just fearful of what might be said and what's shared and what's not shared. But my view of that is, like, they are already on social media. Your employees are out there, whether it's in work time or not. They'll probably have a Facebook account and an Instagram account. And, it's the employer's responsibility really to inform and educate them on the risks, but also the opportunities of using social properly. If you choose to ignore it and just hope that they don't use it, that's not a strategy, in my view. So I would like to see a bit more structure, maybe in those regulated industries a bit more. So
Sarah, you make that point, and I think really well about, everybody's doing it, and some people, oh my goodness, are doing it very, very badly.
Yeah.
And I just wonder what you think about the fact that you're right, the market's matured, and we've got, tools like sort of LinkedIn Premium, and social selling perhaps is getting a bit of a bad reputation. Do you think that's going to put people off?
Well, yeah, I think certainly this year, there's, this catapulted social, because suddenly teams weren't allowed to meet each other. The pandemic has put us in a place where digital was changing anyway for businesses, but I think it just changed a whole lot quicker this year. I think it forced the hand of a lot of businesses that were perhaps a little bit hesitant of adopting this approach. In that, though, you see businesses starting to, I think I think a lot of organisations just thought, right, we need to go out there and just get the tools that people need without the enablement and education that sits behind it. And that's the danger, because then you learn bad habits, or suddenly you start throwing tools out and going, oh, well, it doesn't work then, does it? And it actually isn't the tool. It's like with anything, it's always tools and processes and people. And, you take one or two of those things out of the equation, it's never going to work. So I think also people start to get embedded into bad habits, and they'll take offline habits and transfer it to online habits. So a great example of that might be cold calling, and it still exists, and it works for some businesses. It's a numbers game, but then that just becomes mass in-mailing on LinkedIn, and that's just not the right behavior. It's a switch of behavior. It's not, you can't just take that tactic and transfer it online. So it's a different way of being online. And that's the bit I think perhaps a lot of businesses have missed. And in that sense, yes, it has created a little bit of, I think a lot of people are sitting there thinking, well, I'm not sure about this. I'm just getting so many spam invites on LinkedIn. It's just putting me off. And I'm always a big advocate that it's always got to be quality over quantity, and just start, nurturing networks in a way that you would in the room. Just do it online. Don't just, it's not a popularity contest. We're not playing at being celebrities here. This is about relationship building. So you wouldn't do it in the real world, so don't do it online either. So
it's the old adage, isn't it? In terms of, if you're doing it right for the right reasons, if you've got something interesting to say, it's going to be interesting to say. If you take email, for example, Sarah, for years, I've made this point, and I've taught in and around email and marketing automation, amongst other things, for a while. And, email is a incredibly good delivery vehicle for content that's good. Yeah. But it's equally really good at delivering crap content. And in-mail is almost, or perhaps that's not a new principle, but as what you're saying is, if there's been this gold rush towards LinkedIn particularly, for the right or wrong reasons, if you've got crap and you're trying to put it out via that route, and whether that's aggressive kind of, hi, I'd like to connect with you, and then suddenly I'm just going to try and sell at you, versus read our brochure or whatever, or my thing that brings me out in absolute hives is a white paper or a thought leadership piece, which it never is normally. What you're saying, you're helping organizations wrestle with those same challenges. It's just the finesse of, well, it's a different medium, but get this bit right, and it just is another way, turn it on its head, to get your positive and your differentiating stories out there to people that will be engaged with you, rather than, if you're going to send out crap, it's still going to be crap.
And I think and I think the bit that people really struggle with, if I'm being honest, especially in business, and for years, right, I've been in B2B for a long time, and I think there's a little bit of not having a personality in B2B. It's all about the products. It's all about the brand. And I think what people really wrestle with is it's actually okay to be yourself, and to put a little bit of personality into who you are, because that's who you are at home, and that's who you are in work. And I've really noticed that, actually. I think since started my business, I've really stopped trying to be who I think the industry thinks I should be, like the marketing, the director or whatever. And I've actually just been who I am, and I enjoy it more. And I think actually it just comes across, and authentic is the word of the day, isn't it? I think at the moment, or the word of the year in B2B, but it really is, and I think people who appreciate that. So I think a lot of employees will struggle to let their guard down a little bit, because we do have a bit of this is the persona I am in business, and therefore this is how I should be. But if nothing else, what this year's taught us is actually it's okay to be who you are, and I think adapting that kind of behavior online will work much better for folks if they get comfortable with it. And that's the bit I think a lot of people aren't comfortable, and they struggle to get comfortable with it. So
I think you're right. I think that's a really valuable point about, and it's interesting you say you found it liberating, Sarah, to be able to be authentic and be more of yourself. I'll be honest, and I found it, or probably still do a little bit, a bit more challenging, because for me, different generation, the separation of home and work was pretty absolute. And so when you are, on the Zoom calls, or when you're in your social media and you are being yourself, and I think it does come from confidence, but I'd be interested to know is there a particular persona when you're doing the work that you do with tribal impact? And you mentioned, which I think is really interesting, that you also work with board level.
Yes.
Is there a persona that finds this harder, or is a role, or is it actually down to the individual?
It's very much down to the individual. It's very interesting actually when we work with a lot of executives though, because again, I think they come across in many ways the way I felt when I was working in corporate. You know, this is the role, this is what I am. And then when you start to talk to them about, you know, what they do, what they support, what they believe in, it's fascinating, you know, and you just think, you know, at the end of the day, you're really interesting. And I think your employees would find you really interesting if you maybe communicated that a little bit more and gave them a bit of insight into what makes you tick, what motivates you, because you know, open up a little bit and start being a little bit more engaging on that level. And I think that doesn't matter. It's not just execs; it's everywhere. I think if I think about salespeople, you know, they put up quite often put a front up because this is their role, this is what they do, and they're targeted hard, right? And no matter what industry, when you're in sales, it's a tough job because you're getting doors slammed in your face. You've got to be resilient and thick-skinned. They have learned to be tough, and suddenly I'm asking them to be all soft and squidgy a little bit and just let a bit of themselves out, and they're kind of like, oh, well, you know, that's not what we do, is, you know. But it's a cultural shift, you know, it's a cultural change. And I was just talking to a customer yesterday actually. It's about changing every conversation, like the first line sales manager to their team, you know, rather than how many calls did you make, how many contacts did you reach, how many people have you visited. It's more about, you know, how many searches have you done, have you shared any content this week? It doesn't look like you have. Are you nurturing your relationships? How are you building your network? So it's changing the conversation, it's changing the relationship, and I think that helps people get comfortable. So sometimes asking employees to get comfortable and more confident with social can only happen when the organization shows it either from the top down or supports it through the infrastructure right the way through. And this is why a tool won't fix it, and it'll certainly help, but actually it's much more than that. It's about a cultural shift that helps build confidence and comfort within the organization. So
yeah, the culture word, Sarah, it's come out, actually, you've said it there, but from a lot of what you've said in the last 10-15 minutes is around from the top. If you've got people that are applying a sticking plaster or desperation of, we need leads, I've read something in a book that says this social selling thing will get us POs within 3 months, everyone go for it, you know. But that kind of paint a picture that's scary but possible. If you've got organizations, departments led by people that are people, and this is your point as well, isn't it? You don't, to Shane's kind of challenge on it, it's not you have to take your suit off entirely. You might just take your tie off or relax your tie a bit. It's finding, everybody's got to find their own level of what they're willing to share and to be comfortable with. Exposing themselves, that's a terrible phrase, but the idea of, that they're willing to be themselves online. But of course the other side of it is they're not then what worries me, and I'm sure we've seen examples of, is when it's clearly manufactured. It's the other side of the coin where you know, they're trying to be something not that disingenuous, that unauthentic, if you like, that counter word of what you've described. And
I agree with that. And I think you'll get found out, right? It's really risky. It's just really, you know, and I write all my blogs, right? I do my own social posting. I don't do automation, right? What you see is what you get. And I just really believe in that. And, you know, on my social profiles, you've got to be yourself. And I just don't think it's worth.
Just to challenge that, if I may, and not that I disagree with you, but I just wonder, in terms of how do you get that across to particularly corporates, of how to scale that? Because having had conversations with clients myself on this, they'll go, oh, I'm not going to be able to make the time. And you could say, well, you can make the time. Do you think there is any room for any technology tools or automation in there, or is it just no, just play it really safe, be yourself and do it yourself?
No, you can do it yourself, but tools can help. So, and automation is not, I wouldn't sort of automate like auto posting out. You want to share content that's true to you. But for example, the advocacy tools. Okay, so we give people little routines, biteable routines, things that they can swallow and cope with, even if it's like 5 minutes a day. But the tools like advocacy tools really save a lot of time, because one of the most time consuming things is finding content. Now, if the advocacy tool within a company was set up properly and it had a good mix of third-party content and brand content, and that's where a lot of advocacy tools go wrong, because they're full of brand content and they don't realize that people don't want to just spout out brand content. But if the mix is right, if the content mix is right, then that can save you a ton of time, because if you find interesting content in there, you can sit on a Friday for half an hour with a glass of wine and just schedule your content for the following week and go, oh, that's an interesting article, that's an interesting, that will save you about 3 hours trying to find content. So tools can do that. And on the flip side, social selling, Sales Navigator is superb for saving time if you use it properly. You know, you can set up the notifications, the alerts. You don't have to live in Sales Navigator 3 hours a day. You go in when the triggers tell you to go in if you set it up properly. So tools can massively save time if people know how to use it. And there is one other thing I wanted to mention actually that just came to my head, is that not everybody wants to be social, and that is perfectly okay. And I think organization, we're not here to push everybody online. It makes me sort of shake a little bit when I hear people, right, we're going to put this in their KPIs, we're going to make it mandatory, and I'm like, oh, please don't do that. That's, you know, if people don't want to be social, that's okay. But the ones that are social will start to, you know, see different things happening to them. They'll get those inbound opportunities, they'll get those referral requests, they'll get those speaking opportunities, and the people sat next to them that aren't will eventually be sat there looking at them going, well, how did you do that then? They'll come, but in their own time. And
I couldn't agree with you more, Sarah. I've seen that approach fail. You know, that's sort of forced, and it's so uncomfortable, and the employees are uncomfortable. And yet, you know, particularly if you're working with sales teams, which I do, and they're a competitive bunch. So of course, when the first person to use social selling gets a sale, then all of a sudden the naysayers who are like, well, I'm not on LinkedIn because I'm not looking for a job, which has been said to me many times, suddenly, as you say, get super interested. So I think that's a great tip.
I've seen it over and over again, and it works every time. It really does. And also people kind of need to see the light in their own time. I think, you know, you can't push them any faster than they're willing to go. So just leave them, let them carry on. They'll come. Just have that confidence.
It's funny actually. What you've counted is something I've talked about for years for content marketing. Is the Kevin Costner film from 1989, The Field of Dreams, where he has to tear down a sweet corn field, and James Earl Jones, the voice of Darth Vader, says to him, "Build it and they will come." And that's enough for Kevin Costner to build to tear down his sweet corn field, and a dead baseball team from the 1900s will come on, and it will all be good in the world. What you're making a really good case for is, look, it is the long game with this stuff. Is if you build the right kind of principles, and to pick up a point you've just made, is that almost that harmony of human and technology or tools. That's the happy medium, isn't it? Is have the confidence, have the culture and the confidence, but don't expect it to be a kind of overnight success. This is best practice principles for the longer term, not for a quick Q1 fix.
Yeah, we actually map out, I think I sent it to you, Shane, actually, the journey of a social seller could be at least 6 months, if not a little bit longer. And we map out onto that, you know, where they get all excited and they've got this new tool, and then after month 2, they're kind of like, well, this isn't working, you know, and that's the point, that's the bit where the sales managers really need to hone in and push them through. So you can almost, I've seen it over and over again, the mapping of the behaviors and when people need that lift up, and then suddenly something will happen. Little things. They won't win a deal overnight, but they will start to see somebody will reach out of the blue that they've not spoken to for ages, or they'll get referred into somebody, and then it's like, oh, I think I get this now. And they realize it's not pick phone up, get appointment. It's not that kind of immediate effect. It's a little bit more, it's a bit like a black art really, but keeping at it and knowing that it will work. And certainly on the sales side, we always say, build a pipeline of relationships as well as your pipeline of revenue. But once you've built 6 months worth of pipeline of relationships, these will just start to drop. And when they drop thick and fast, and they want to move quickly because they've already decided they want to work with you. So, and we see it time and time again, the behavior of as somebody new to this journey, this maturity journey.
So there is a bit of a challenge here, and it just made me reflect here, Sarah, in terms of you thinking about the long game. And I possibly could claim one of the longest long games through LinkedIn connection of anybody, and I can't think how long I've been on, but I did work out that actually only last year somebody who I'd worked with, the wonderful Hannah Wilson at IPC Magazines, who at that time, back in the 90s, was a graduate trainee, literally last year.
Century.
Yeah, all right. That was not necessary, Steve. Thank you very much. Only year before last, contacted me and had become CMO at Gumtree. And she said there was only one name on LinkedIn that had B2B next to it, which was you.
Oh.
And it's just like, that is a long sales cycle. And,
yeah, but isn't it wonderful that just gives me goosebumps, because that is just the power of social networking, isn't it? Isn't it wonderful that you can still stay in touch with people that you knew like 20 years ago? All my old IBM friends from my very first job at IBM, we're still connected. And I met up with another one actually not long ago, who we used to work in the same office in Basingstoke in the 90s. And it's like, wow, this is so cool. And it makes me very excited.
It is great. And I've got to say here, I think one of the things for those listening who perhaps at the start out is that one of the things you don't realise when you start out in your career, that if you're going to stay in your career, how helpful those connections are. And I know you talk a lot about your personal brand building, but actually that's a challenge for organisations, isn't it? Because actually these people will move on. Whose network is it anyway?
Yeah, that's right. And I do get that question a lot, actually, as an objection. It's like, why would I train my people, and then they clear off and go and get another job? And I'm like, I get that. But also when they get into that job, they're going to carry on growing their network, of which, because you are all connected to that person, is exposed to you too. And it could be a competitor. I mean, I'm connected to my competitors. I don't have an issue with that. I'm not closed doors. I'm not all secret squirrels. I stay true to myself and keep my direction going, and I think that comes with probably the confidence and comfort with social and the maturity of it, and using it and knowing what to say and what not to say. I think, but from my perspective, the employee voice that sits behind the brand is hugely powerful. It's trustworthy and it's influential, and I just can't see why you wouldn't harness the power of that and the scale of that, and it just brings a whole new level of credibility to your organization, because you're not afraid to put your employee voice in front of the logo, which I think says huge amounts to attracting talent and retaining talent, and it's all connected to culture. So
it's interesting, as opposed to the kind of stock line that for years organizations would force you to, my opinions are my own, not necessarily my employer. That was the kind of the first opening statement of any Twitter profile for a long time. Listen, it's worth you knowing, Sarah, by the way, just to pick up on that point, one of the three of us does have a trophy somewhere in the house, which is the LinkedIn before LinkedIn existed. Right. So for what Shane's just described in terms of that, there was by design as well, that Shane's incredibly good at networking. But the reason I mention that is that many people, myself included, and we spoke with the lady, Julia Porter, about this a couple of weeks back. She would be in the same camp as me, which is, I'm not as naturally a networker as Shane is, but it strikes me that if you can use social properly, this is also a really good thing for those people that would find it hard to make these connections and these friendships in the real world, face to face. And it doesn't mean that doesn't come, but this isn't all about you have to be incredibly extroverted to exploit this. Quite the opposite, it feels like to me. It's a great tool for the slightly meeker of us.
Yeah, I absolutely. I mean, I mean, I've worked, I always remember when I started my business 5 years ago, I thought, I have never worked in sales. I had one little spout of cold calling and it frightened the hell out of me, to be honest with you, because I just got the phone slammed down and people didn't want to, and I was just like, oh, I don't think I could do this. And when I started my business, I was terrified because I just thought, how on earth am I going to grow a business when I can't even make a phone call? I've never written a proposal. I wouldn't know how to do a quote. And actually, if this is what sales is, then I quite enjoy it actually, because all it is about building relationships, and it's perfect. You know, if you're not that type that wants to get on the phone and rocks up at people's doors, and you know, if you're not naturally that sort of person, then this is a really good way to do this in a much more, you know, remote way, but in a nice way. You can still build relationships through online media, and I prefer it, to be honest with you.
So on that, Sarah, I think that's really, that will give heart to a lot of people listening. But I think it's also interesting, you know, you came out of big corporate life, you know, with big sort of a support network, teams, and setting up Tribal Impact 5 years ago. You probably had some challenges along the way, and I think it's interesting, you're going in and you're saying, you know, working with organizations, big organizations on this sort of stuff, but actually it's great to hear you saying you're really enjoying using the same tools for yourself and to grow your business. But have there been any difficulties for you, you know, doing this?
Oh yeah, what, starting a business?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, I always had a dream that I'd have my own business one day. Ever since I started my very first job at IBM, I always knew I would one day do it. I just wasn't quite sure what in. So I've been on that journey of realization. Yeah, that was a challenge, I think, when I started. It's like, how on earth am I going to grow a business when I've never had a role in sales? I'm going to have to work this stuff out for myself. So that was a bit tricky. And over the 5 years, it's, you know, I've faced a lot of challenges. I got a coach actually very early on in this journey, which has helped me massively, that I talk to once a month, huge amount of help. But taking on employees, that terrifies me. We did that a couple of years ago. You know, if we're to grow a business, we need to actually start taking on employees. So that was a challenge for me, because it just terrified me. I mean, like, you know, it's just the whole legal side of it. All of that's quite new. Everything really. And we've developed products now and licensing agreements. It's like, what's that all about? I've never had to do that before. But you know what, Shane, I tell you what, I love learning. And every day I'm learning something new. And my coach has really helped me to realize that, which is, it's okay to put yourself in really uncomfortable situations, because that is when you know you're stretching yourself. And I always liken it to a cliff, right? It's like standing on the edge of a cliff and knowing that, you know, you're going to jump off and you will fly, but God, these cliffs are getting higher. You know, the bigger the business gets, it's like you can't see the floor at the bottom, but you're still going to jump, and you know you're going to do all right, but you just got to get on with it. So it is scary. It is slightly terrifying, but I'm getting used to that. I'm learning that feeling is okay, as long as you know, analyze it properly and you don't get too scared. Sometimes fear can get the better of you, can stop you, it can freeze you. And I found that in the early days. I was just so scared I wouldn't move. I wouldn't do anything. But actually, change is not a bad thing. And yeah, so
it's a constant, isn't it? It's very brave of you to say that, Sarah, as well, because, you know, again, back to your point of authenticity, is that, you know, you could have answered that in a very different way. That's not necessarily new problems or challenges, or unique problems or challenges. It's open. Most people, particularly when you get organizations together that are of a similar ilk, that, you know, it's the first one that blinks that will be willing to say, actually, it's quite hard sometimes. So that's a really nice thread to it. Although I will just pick you up on one point, and I was going to talk about, you know, how often the thread that comes through people we talk to on this series is that how the steps they've taken, whether it's education or career or both, have set them out to later down the line without realizing it. You say you're not familiar with creating products, but you did do a degree in product design. And if we talk hairbrushes for a minute, you might remember that you're quite good at product design as well. Tell us about the hairbrush, Sarah.
Yeah, my hairbrush, my lovely hairbrush. Yeah, it's so when I was at uni, I designed, we had what was it? I think it was a project we had to do. We were tasked with designing a hairbrush. And I came up with a hairbrush. I had really long hair. I've got really long, thick hair, but at the time it was really long. And I remember, do you remember the adverts? Why take 2 bottles into the shower when you can take
Of course we
1?
do.
You know, do you remember that?
Oh,
Well,
I modelled myself on the Timotei adverts.
that's it. Well, it was kind of like that. It's like, well, why take 2 hairbrushes? Because I had a vent hairbrush with vents in, and then I had a thick brush for when my hair was dry that I could then brush it through. And I designed this brush that had a interchangeable head, so you could have a brush that had the vents with wide space bristles, and then you just click the head back, and then it became a thick brush with no bristles. Anyway, the university thought it was a good idea, and to be honest, that must have started me off really, because then we took the design to a manufacturer. We took it to several, and one bought it, the one that buys, they manufactures all the hairbrushes for like Superdrug and Boots and stuff up in Scotland. I don't know if they still do, but they bought the manufacturing rights and the patent rights off me. And at the time, you know, as a student, 200 quid goes a long way. So I was just like, yeah, all right then, I'll get a computer for that. So so I took the money and sold the rights, and yeah. And that was my.
You were nearly an apprentice candidate, but for 2 good reasons. One, you're already successful, and 2, you're far too good to be on the show. By nature of the fact you can actually do it.
I could have gone on Dragon's Den, couldn't I? I don't know whether I'd have survived that.
Well, maybe you will, but maybe they'll give you a chair by the time you get to Dragon's Den.
That'd be nice. But you know, it opened doors. You know, I won an award with Rolls-Royce for that actually, which was lovely. And then that opens another door for you, which gets you your first interview for your year out. And do you know what I mean? And all of those things will all accumulate. To your point, you know, these things, I would just keep your eyes open to all the opportunities, because they are all there. Somebody once said to me that opportunities are all around you. It's just whether you choose to take them or not, or take the risk, and that's the key. So
taking risk is one, I think, that for many, that's the biggest challenge of all, of stepping out of corporate life into setting up your own. And you've always been very already honest about, you know, the fear and the sort of the leaping off a cliff. But in this last year, more than ever, we've all had to continue to learn new things. And I think our pace of learning, everybody, and that was why Steve and I set up this podcast, is just we felt it would be a good way to connect with people when we couldn't physically meet up, and just still sort of have a conversation with interesting people. And that's what it's allowed us to do. But what have you learned this year? What's changed for you?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's been a blur actually. If I look back, when I started Tribal 5 years ago, I had 3 young kids. I'd literally just had my 3rd child. So I had 3 kids in 3 years, and we just built a house and we just moved countries. It was mad. So I'm used to a chaotic life. I'm not, you know, I'm kind of okay with that.
So that's an episode of Grand Designs you've described.
Yeah, it kind of was. Yeah, right. Everything about it. I remember standing upstairs in the house that I'm sat in now. We had no roof on, but I was like 6 months pregnant. It was just typical. But if I look at this year, it's been really hard. I'll be honest. We got really busy earlier this year. We were one of the very fortunate businesses that managed to keep going, but we also had the 3 kids at home, homeschooling, whilst we were getting really busy. It was a lot of pressure on me, on the team. You know, the well-being of the team was paramount, but it was just so hectic. So I'm only just starting to learn to breathe out of all of this, actually. It's been one big blur, and we've had changes within the team. We had lots of new customers. It's just been manic. What have I learned? To look after myself more, to take care, even on those days where you really cannot be bothered to go outside. You need to go out, even if it's just around the block to get some fresh air. You've got to force yourself to look after yourself, because if I go wrong, the fact, you know, the kids feel it, the team feels it, the customers feel it, and that's the same for everyone. It's not just me, it's everyone in the team, you know. So that has helped me. That's one thing I have learned, is like taking good care, appreciating even the little things. I often sit looking out my window at the birds and just thinking, wow, what an amazing day. How lucky are we to be okay in all of this? And yeah, I would say it's probably not the answer you were looking for, Shane, but I have had a lot of soul searching this year, for that reason.
I think it is the answer I'm looking for, actually, because I think actually that it's a really important one for all of us, and it's one you have to give yourself permission to. And I massively admire anybody who's been working from home with younger, I mean, in fact, they're not daughters, are they? You describe them as princesses, so I do hope that you've been doing dragon and suitable princess training as part of the working from home. But it's so challenging because I don't have that. I have that luxury that, in fact, my grown-up daughter and son moved back at the beginning of lockdown, and actually for me it was superb because I had 2 extra chefs in the house. You know, that was not a stress.
Love it.
Don't rub it in, Shane. She's not even got a kitchen unless the development has been done. She clearly has. Listen, I mean, Shane's right. The answer you've given is the right answer there, Sarah, and it's very, again, open and honest of you, and will resonate because a lot of people will have been dealing with similar. I mean, you wrote something recently as well about that guilt, that ongoing mum guilt of that balance. That's another. I mean, we're talking about with social selling in the main about spinning plates of, well, I've got to do my day job, but how do I find time for that? You know, you're also talking about that work versus mum versus wife versus friend versus all those other hats and plates. You know, that discipline of knowing to do a little bit here and a little bit there. I suppose that leads us back to the social selling, as you're saying. This isn't something that takes over. You don't block out your Mondays to do this.
No.
Leave me alone, everyone. I've got my social selling hat on. You find a rhythm very much like you do with your other hats of doing this as part of everything you do every day, week, whatever it might be, but little and often rather than it completely in boxes and demarked.
Yeah, it becomes part of your DNA, I think, when you embed it into your daily working life. That's when, because a lot of people say, well, how long do you spend on LinkedIn? I was like, I don't think I could tell you, to be honest, because it just comes naturally now, and it's building that habit. But the balancing act, my coach has really helped me this year get through all of this. And she likens it to a wobble board, you know, those wobble boards you used to stand on, you know, and sometimes it tips more one way than the other. You're all in work. And yeah, that mum guilt has been a real thing this year. You know, when your kids are not normally here, they don't see you working all the time, but that has been really hard this year, where they're just looking, going, why are you still working? Why are you still working? And it's like, kids, you know, you're going to have to just get on. And it's that has been a struggle. But they're back at school now, so it's all good. So for that, I'm quite thankful, I have to say. So it's good for all of us.
Well, that's interesting about the wobble board, because one of the things it's supposed to develop is a strong core, and I think you're demonstrating that, Sarah. And I think that you know, that will be heartening again, that for all of us to just think, it's not easy for any of us. We all have moments, and I think again, one of the things I found through, you know, just the ease of digital networks, forget social selling, but actually it's so easy now to ask people for help, and people who are helpful. And I think that, to me, is one of the things I enjoy most about using social networks, is that actually being able to both give, i.e. share things I find useful, but also to receive. And oh my goodness, if you ask, as in fact you did, you were really generous. You mentioned some content, I asked for something, and, you know, super helpful. But community problem solving, I think, is perhaps underused within our networks. We're not used to asking for help perhaps in that way.
No, and it is easier now, and I think, you know, that your networks do allow you to do that. And I think this is why I think if there is a message I'd give to people, is to invest time in your networks. You know, don't leave your networks to chance. Don't use your networks when you need them. That's the classic inactive on our maturity matrix box. You know, invest time in your network. It's like your treasure pot. It's the place that you go to ask for help, to get referrals, to see if somebody can, you know, to ask them, oh, I notice you know this person. How do you get on with them? And, you know, investing time in networks is good for you, you know, and your career and your future. And I would not leave it until you need it. I would take a little time each week and spend that time doing it.
It's a really nice message, Sarah. It's a really nice one to end on as well, I think, because, you know, on the subject of time, you've got the plates to spin. We have a birthday today as well, don't we, in the household?
We do.
So
yes,
we do not want to distract
birthday.
you from that too much. But
Okay.
you need to go and rescue from the top of the tower. So
Yeah.
on behalf of Shane and I and everyone that's listened, Sarah, thanks ever so much. It's been a real pleasure to talk with you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I love that. It's really, really good, and it's quite nice. You don't often get time to reflect, so I appreciate your time, and asking me the questions. It's very grounding. Thank you. So,
thank you, Sarah. That's been really great.
Fabulous stuff, Shane. Really, really honest, really insightful from Sarah, and those last points around, you know, not quite. It's never too late, but start soon, give it a go, try. What would we say to people above and beyond what Sarah said, if anyone's listening in and feels inspired, but, you know, they're sitting there not knowing quite what to apply themselves to, where to start?
I think that's a really good point. It's never too late. And I think the more senior you are, perhaps the more daunting this might be, because it's a new skill. And yet actually, if you're thinking ahead and you are in corporate life and you're thinking about, or I might like to become a non-executive director, or I might like to join the board of sort of community or charity work. Having these social skills are incredibly valuable to those organisations, but also to help you get them. And I see, and I meet, and I know you do too, lots of people who have this fear factor of actually about using this and how to go about it. But it's not that difficult, really, is it, Steve?
No, it fears. I mean, we often fear the unknown. And what I will say to people in that situation is a couple of things, really. Firstly, if you're not confident with the work side of it, perhaps LinkedIn, go and sign up on Twitter and go and follow people, organizations, other accounts or hashtags on things you're interested, your personal hobbies. Get a kind of rhythm and a feel for how easy it is to actually get involved. And we didn't talk much about it, but, you know, passively, the idea of you don't have to be broadcasting on social media to see the value of it. You can just listen into conversations, for sure. So build up that confidence that it isn't that difficult to do. And I think Sarah made some really good points around that, sharing, and how once you almost kind of get this stone rolling, it finds its own momentum, that people will learn from others that quick. Oh, connected with somebody, I've had an intro, all those nice little quick wins that can really help to just give people confidence. The other thing I'd say as well, actually, is when it comes to sharing, or you don't always have to create your own original posts. You can curate content, find other people's interesting topics. And frankly, if it's something that you'd be willing to talk to somebody about over the phone or in a meeting if you met them, then it's probably the right thing to share on LinkedIn. So it isn't as hard as perhaps people think. That's what I would say, Shane.
I agree, because I think you have to find your own rhythm. And I think it's very hard when you've got the day job, whatever it might be. And for me, it's consulting, but I know how important this is. I know I could do loads better. But my rhythm I started to find with Twitter certainly was when I was attending a conference and basically just posting my learnings, because it did two things. It sort of helped embed those learnings with me and what I was finding helpful. It also connected me to everybody in what was the physical room who didn't know you were necessarily there if it was a conference of 1,000 people. And of course, these days, with virtual events, it's an extremely good way of reaching the audience who's not there and might have missed it. So I think that rhythm, finding your own rhythm, what works for you, is a really big takeout.
Yeah, I think the word helpful in there as well. I mean, it comes up all the time when we speak, doesn't it, Shane, on marketing, helpful sells. But if you're, to your point of using Twitter or whatever the platform is, to share, as you said, at conferences, whether they're virtual or physical, some of the learnings, if you're doing that to be helpful to others or people that you do or don't know that you think might find that interesting, I think that's absolutely the sentiment. If you're trying to do it to be a show off or to be something you're not, you know, that artificial, that non-authentic, then I think that's where people sometimes fall into the trap of, oh my goodness, I need to gain followers, I need to get a quantity of people hearing what I've got to say. No, just be yourself and be helpful. be interesting, be part of the conversation, whether you're listening or speaking or both. And I think it's all skills we've got within us. We just are playing it down a slightly different route. It's social media rather than over the phone or in a meeting or wherever you might normally behave in this way. So it's back to that skill set that's probably already there.
Yeah, and of course you also have to recognise that even if you don't put things out that you're comfortable with, some of your colleagues, like you, Steve, might mention things like last century and not being the meekest. So, most of the information is out there, whether you put it out or not. But on that point, I won't be bitter. What I'd also like to say,
don't be bitter, because I did start in last century as well, Shane, as people that I work with often remind me of.
But what I will say is that for me, I think that transparency and authenticity, Sarah demonstrated so brilliantly. And it's no wonder she's been tipped as one of the top 20 female entrepreneurs to watch for 2020. And I think it is that much more modern way of being comfortable in your own skin. And I know what she said, particularly around that balance of home, family, work, and your own ability to do what you want to do, whether that's at work or outside work, is a challenge that all of us face, but perhaps don't talk about enough. So I'm really grateful she did talk about it, because I think that's very helpful.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm sure there are a lot of people listening in that will have taken solace from that and felt, oh, actually, I'm not alone, if they felt they were, and can see Sarah's journey as one that's really inspiring. So absolute huge thanks to Sarah, and indeed her family, particularly her daughter, who was waiting desperately to celebrate her Rapunzel birthday, and she lent her mum to us so we could have that conversation. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Again, another fascinating episode. Look out for the chat on the LinkedIn group, which you'll get to from wwlpodcast.co.uk, where we'll certainly share things like the book that we talked about and other useful pieces. But tell us your thoughts. How have you found this journey? Are you new to social networking, social media? Are you an old hand and got some really interesting tips to share? Whatever it might be, we'd love to hear from you. Remember also, if you go there, you can find the further episodes that we've recorded over these last 2 series, over 20 episodes, probably about 25 hours of free, interesting, really interesting conversation from people such as Sarah. So have a listening in there. And if you need more, well, just wait till next week when we'll release yet another podcast. Thanks, everybody.